Welcome back to Football and Football with Lane and Devin. We're back for our third week here and our third episode. A bit later than usual because of the international break, which we don't always love, but it has to come around this time of year. And we're gonna highlight some of the games from the Premier League a couple weeks back, but we all love the league, and it's finally coming back this weekend. And we'll look at some of the past results and the big game we were all looking forward to between Manchester City and Liverpool. What are your thoughts, Devin, on the big Manchester City Liverpool game we've all been looking forward to?
Well, I think it was interesting. It wasn't exactly the result I was expecting. I thought City would have been able to get a few more past Liverpool, but definitely wasn't the case. And as it ended in a 1-1 draw, going back to what we talked about last week, I think it was interesting. We saw Jota and Firmino starting the lineup for Liverpool. Seeing Firmino drop down into a cam position with Salah up top, and they only got one goal, but one goal against Manchester City isn't a bad outing. They did create a few chances, and it definitely had some promise to work in starting those four. But the downside to that is then obviously they have no depth, and then they're back to their same problem if they have no one off the bench in the attack, which I know was much of the purpose of Jota. And obviously, if he can start for them and do well, it's great. But now they're back to having very limited options off the bench again in the attack, which is probably something they'd like to keep. But nonetheless, they held their own against City with a bunch of injuries, and keep getting injuries in the back now. Had Joe Gomez and Matip on the weekend, but now you got Joe Gomez out for a long term, and they just keep piling up injuries on that team. But nonetheless, they seem to keep on hanging on to get results. But it'll be interesting to see how long that continues.
Yeah, for sure. It's a very interesting game. Many thought there'd be a lot more goals in it for City, and you could have seen a 2-1 City win if De Bruyne could have put away his penalty, which many were surprised not to see go in, knowing it's De Bruyne, and he never usually misses from the spot or anywhere on the field. But it was quite a shocking miss and dragged it wide. But yeah, like you said, with Liverpool chalking up more and more injuries, you don't know where they could end up in this table. And Henderson, Matip, Gomez, Van Dijk, it just keeps adding up, and we don't know where it's going to stop. And hopefully, Liverpool can get some healthy players back in time to mount a Premier League challenge.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how they continue through the Premier League and the Champions League. Obviously, all the competitions they're in, depth is what you need, and depth is definitely not what they're going to be possessing as they move forward with all these injuries, and especially at the back here now, like you say, you have Fabinho out, you have Gomez out, you have Van Dijk out, you have Trent out for a few weeks. It's going to be an interesting one to navigate, and seem to be doing well for now. But as more of those guys have to play considerable minutes, just like some of the injuries they've had now, the guys that have played considerable minutes over the last couple of seasons, it might continue to add up for some other guys, and I hope for their sake that they get some guys fit and they can manage to keep the season going. But it definitely wouldn't be a surprise to me to see it be a struggle with some guys missing, and with a few members of that team pretty much going to have to be playing game in game out, regardless of how many games that is, because they simply just don't have enough depth on that team anymore with that many injuries.
Yeah, exactly. Now you'll be seeing Salah out for 2 weeks after testing positive for COVID. And then they'll be losing Joe Gomez and Van Dijk for the rest of the season, which sounds like it's very possible they'll be gone for most of the season, especially Joe Gomez after this bad training injury he pulled up with. And Henderson, who knows how long he's going to be out for. We haven't heard much information on that, but it's going to be interesting to see how this Liverpool team can fare with all these injuries.
No, definitely. If you're a young player in Liverpool, I suppose you got to be happy, but there's definitely going to be a few opportunities for them, specifically in some cup competitions or some easier games in the Champions League, at least in their group when they don't play against Ajax and Atalanta. But nonetheless, it's going to be interesting to see how that one continues throughout the rest of the season, and maybe they'll keep pulling out some results, but I'd struggle to see it.
Yeah, for sure. So we'll move on to the another big matchup that we saw being played in the Emirates in London, and between Arsenal, who had a big win against Manchester United, but didn't spark any big questions in that game, and they really didn't look too good. But then you come up against Aston Villa, who have been very good and very questionable in some games, and they were really put to the sword against Aston Villa and got absolutely smoked. What are your thoughts in this game, Devin?
Yeah, it was definitely an interesting one after, like you say, beating Manchester United the week before, although definitely not in a convincing result. But nonetheless, coming against Aston Villa, a team that's performed well against stronger sides this season, as we've seen against Liverpool, and come in and Ollie Watkins scores a couple of goals against another big side again, and own goal early against Arsenal probably didn't help them, and it ended up being that Aston Villa carried the stronger the attack in that game, and it looked like a game Aston Villa were going to win, and this Arsenal just couldn't get enough going, and that's another loss for Arsenal. They haven't had a amazing start to the season, but they have had some bright spots. But for a team that had more positive hopes and a hope that maybe they wouldn't look as much as the Arsenal of old, they have unfortunately looked as the Arsenal of old, just with a few different players this season, at least to start.
Yeah, well, I couldn't agree with you anymore there. Aston Villa looked tremendous against Arsenal here. Ollie Watkins is fantastic signing. He's turning out to be scoring goals for fun for this Aston Villa team, and Grealish still providing more and more assists. Barkley looking like another fantastic signing with all the assists he's providing, great attacking outlets. And then this Arsenal team is just looking questionable once again with Arteta just failing to deceive again, and you don't know what he's going to do next. But he is looking very poor with his tactics lately, and you got to question why the media is questioning Lampard and Ollie some days, and Arteta's not getting much criticism because it looks like he's been the worst out of the three, in my opinion.
No, definitely. I think Arteta's definitely should have the most question marks above his head right now, and there was a lot of hope for that Arsenal team this year, not necessarily to get to Champions League football, but at least to be able to compete a little bit more again, and to look at least a little bit better and not have the typical Arsenal collapses or Arsenal results against poor sides of the past. And sure, there've been a few bright spots. Gabriel's looked fairly good to start the season. Saka's a good, promising young player, but like you say, there's some interesting tactical decisions from that team so far. They've been playing overly defensive in some instances. Lacazette is still being chosen to start up top with Aubameyang out wide, which then means that Pepe isn't getting any minutes. So you got a $72 million man who isn't that old still, that is just sitting on your bench. There's definitely a lot of question marks on that team. Although we have had some good performances, Elneny is still getting a lot of minutes when you have some other good players in your midfield. Maitland-Niles hasn't been getting much play time after a good season last season. So there's definitely a lot of question marks with that team right now, and some things that could be changed that may improve that side for sure.
Oh, for sure. I couldn't agree with you more. Like, you got to look at his tactics on playing Aubameyang on the left just to accommodate for Lacazette down the middle, which is very questionable because Lacazette's looked extremely poor. I'd rather have Patrick Bamford or a fit Olivier Giroud, which they got rid of and made room for Lacazette. Giroud scoring a lot more than Laka is, and he's off the bench for most days for Chelsea. And you got to look at the signing of Willian, who's looked like he could go to the MLS. He's been so poor. He's just been very slow and uncreative. But I'd have to say we'll move on to Willian's old team, who had a great result against Sheffield United at Stamford Bridge. A huge win for your club here, Devin. What do you have to say about that?
That was definitely a very positive performance. Seeing Ziyech get us another full game in with the rest of the squad in the Premier League, and he's looking to be the real deal and arguably our best attacking signing so far based on current form. And obviously Timo Werner's been scoring a bunch of goals, but Ziyech's vision and his final pass has been very good, and we saw that again in this game. Is something that Chelsea side was lacking last season. Was they had some people that could score, but they were lacking a true creator, and Ziyech has definitely done that so far this season. Sloppy start in that game. McGoldrick seems to score all of his Premier League goals against Chelsea and got another one on the day, but otherwise Chilwell got involved again. Thiago Silva and Mendy still looking good at the back and keeping things a bit more secure back there than we were last season, and it's definitely a lot of promising signs in Chelsea, and I think everyone in Chelsea was a little bit disappointed that the international break had to come to dispute the role of the team, because it's definitely been looking good the last couple of weeks, and hopefully it can continue.
I think you got to love the investment here from the Chelsea board and Roman Abramovich, and the great buys from Frank Lampard and the board, with 8 goal contributions and 5 of them coming from new signings and acquisitions. 2 of them coming from the back line here, from Chilwell and Silva getting up there and scoring goals, and Werner having a late goal, which he really needed because he's been kind of lacking in the goal side of things in the Premier League. And you get Ziyech having 2 assists, which is absolutely huge. He was talking about his connection he has with Werner, which is just great off the start in their first couple of games. It's looking great for Chelsea fans, and hopefully they can continue as great form and mount a title challenge, which the way this league's going, you could see any team winning it right now.
Yeah, it's definitely very open right now, and I think that Chelsea squad definitely believes they have a chance to be involved in that title race. And at current form, they're actually finally keeping some balls out of the net, and they're looking a bit promising going forward. So I think that's definitely the hope is they can mount a title push.
Another London matchup or another London club here at Selhurst Park for Crystal Palace with a huge win over Leeds United. Picked up another 4-1 win, same as their London rivals Chelsea. And this is a huge win for Crystal Palace, just continuing form, and they're pounding in goals for fun at times here, and it's good to see this team scoring goals with the attacking outfits that they have. What did you make of all the goal scorers they had and the great result they pulled off?
Now, this Crystal Palace team has definitely looked a lot more dynamic going forward this season, and we know that Crystal Palace have been fairly good at defending over the last couple of seasons and have been able to do that fairly well, which has allowed them to steal some points off of some big clubs. But they're actually being able to score some goals and win against the smaller clubs in the games they've struggled against in previous years due to their lack of ability to attack. But Zaha having that extra creative guy and Eze next to him in the midfield has been a great help for him and takes a little bit of the attention away from Zaha, creates a few more chances, and I think that's been a great signing for them. On the flip side of things, I think Leeds have definitely not been the same side with Calvin Phillips out on injury. I don't think their back line has adjusted well enough either. I know Koch definitely hasn't played as well as some Leeds fans would have hoped so far in the Premier League, and they're still waiting on their other new signing, Diego Llorente, to come back from injury. But that team definitely has not looked the same since the first few weeks when Calvin Phillips was in the side compared to now when they have Struich, their young Dutch centre back, playing in that midfield role, and it just hasn't been the same.
Yeah, for sure. And you got to look at we can handle Leeds back line, but we got to look at Crystal Palace's back line. They've scored a lot of goals in 12, but they've also allowed the same amount as 12 goals, which is very scary for a team that's so far up the table. They need to somehow figure out how to not allow so many goals because it'll really help them push the top of the table with how interesting this league is. And you could see them really pushing the top of the table if they can keep scoring this amount of goals and start to learn how to close down these goals, which is a great. It's also great to see that they're scoring goals, but Wilfred Zaha is not on the goal sheet, which is a rare sight to see for this club.
Yeah, definitely. I think part of Crystal Palace's 12 goals is their 4 conceded against Chelsea. So you take those away, it looks a little bit more respectable. But I definitely agree. If they can tighten up a little bit more at the back, then with as many goals as they've been scoring, I think that team definitely has a chance to stick around that mid-table spot for sure. They've been a pleasant surprise so far this season, and I hope for their sake they can continue it because they got a lot of fun players up there in the attack.
Yeah, for sure. So we'll hop on over to Merseyside here, where at Goodison Park we saw a Manchester United and Everton battle, which is a crucial game for both clubs. And you saw Manchester United pull away with a 3-1 victory, which was tense for both sides in this game. It was very close, 2-1 for quite a while until the 95th minute when Edinson Cavani finished it off from a Bruno Fernandes assist. And it was a very big game for both clubs. And who do you think needed it more? And was it a big win for Manchester United, in your opinion?
Well, I think both teams definitely wanted to win in that game after having a rough string of results coming into it. But I think Manchester United definitely needed it more, considering they'd coming off a big win against RB Leipzig, were high in confidence, and then took a tough loss to Arsenal, and then lost midweek to Istanbul, which was definitely one that most fans wouldn't expect, and was a tough one to take as a loss after such a dominant performance the week before in the Champions League. But coming in, Bruno had a much better game, getting a couple of goals, and like you say, Cavani getting his first goal coming in late in the game off of a Bruno assist. And as a Bruno we saw lots of late in the last season, and he can stay back on form for that team. It's definitely going to be a big help to them. But you look at Everton now, it's a rough string of games for them. You've got a loss to Man U, they lost to Newcastle, they've lost to Southampton, they tied to Liverpool. They're without a win in 4 weeks now after such a hot start. And again, they're still missing some players, but they've definitely fallen off from where they started the season.
Yeah, for sure. You got to look at Everton's poor form this season, and after that string of wins they went on, and after their draw against Liverpool, they've really toppled off. And this was a huge win for this Manchester United team, coming off 2 poor results, especially against Arsenal, which they should have realistically won if they came out of the gates and showed that they wanted it. But Bruno Fernandes with another very impressive game with 2 goals and an assist. Beautiful setup for Cavani. He could have taken the goal on himself and got his hat trick, but he was unselfish, passed off to Cavani to get Cavani's first goal, it's a huge confidence boost for Cavani, the 33-year-old who really needed to get off to a start. It's nice to see Luke Shaw getting up the field and getting an assist on a cross. Been rare that United have seen fullbacks getting up there and providing assists, which is nice to see. Sadly, he'll be out for a couple weeks now, which is a big hurt for United. But the positive side is that Alex Telles is going to be back, which is tested positive, negative on his second COVID test. But they need to keep coming consistent with a game against West Brom here, which is a very, very big game for this Manchester United side.
Yeah, it definitely is. You'd hope they can get a result out of that one and not fall back and get another negative result after a positive one. You'd like to be able to keep a string of consistency going for that team, because there's definitely been some games where you see flash of brilliances like against RB Leipzig and against Everton, but for them it's just going to be about stringing a few of those together to try and make a run and gain a bit of confidence.
Yeah, for sure. You can see that United team making a run. If they can stay consistent, you never know, they can push for top of the table. But a team that was at top of the table for a day or so that said, let's end this table at what it is now, is Southampton, the Saints, who actually came off a big win against majorities, Newcastle, on Sunday it was. And they had a big game without their star striker, Danny Ings, and Shea Adams, and Stuart Armstrong had a big performance, and it was great to see them continuing without Danny Ings. What are your thoughts on this big performance in Southampton?
Yeah, it was. I don't think many would have expected them to be able to get a couple of goals behind Newcastle as well as keep a clean sheet. It was definitely a strong performance and a showing, at least in a single game, that as much as Danny Ings has been a key contributor for that team, they're not nothing without Danny Ings, and I think that's a really positive sign for Southampton fans and for the morale of the people within that locker room, because I question how many people would have thought that they would do well without Danny Ings, but you got Shea Adams getting a goal, like you say. Stuart Armstrong had a good performance. Theo Walcott getting a little bit more involved, and Chapeno getting a few more minutes now, getting a start as well. And yeah, it's quite interesting. Southampton have definitely surprised a few teams and a few fans this season, and even now without Danny Ings, they're still performing. So it's a nice run to see. It's a nice surprise to see, and it's nice to see a team like this stay high up the table, and it'll be interesting to see how long they can keep it up.
Yeah, for sure. We can all hope that Southampton team can pull off a Leicester Cinderella story. Even though it's against a mediocre, rather very bad Newcastle side this season, who showed some bright sparks, but really did not have any bright sparks at all this game, only having 40% possession against a very good Southampton team. But this Southampton team really battered Newcastle with 15 shots. And without Danny Ings, that was just very impressive from this Southampton team. And hopefully Shea Adams can keep getting on that score sheet and building confidence as a young kid. And it'd be great to see him working towards that England squad, which has so many great forwards already. And the Saints can keep mounting that title charge, which would be very impressive to see that team all the way at the top of the table at the end of the season to come.
No, definitely. But referring to the team at the top of the table, or got Leicester, or my bad, I'm not talking about the Leicester game. That's the wrong Leicester game. Talking about teams at the top of the table, we got Leicester beating Wolves last week, 1-0, and as you would expect with those two teams, a fairly low scoring matchup with a 1-0 win for Leicester. Vardy getting a pen early and then missing another one shortly after, but nonetheless, fairly defensive game. Wolves still dealing with not a ton of injuries, but nonetheless have got a few key left backs out. So they've got Aït-Nouri playing at left wing back right now, who has had some good performances, but nonetheless, Wolves held their own, but it wasn't enough to beat Leicester, and that brings Leicester further up the table and puts them at the top.
Yeah, for sure. It was nice to see James Maddison back in the starting lineup and Wesley Fofana working his way into this Leicester side. It'll be great to see what this young center back has for this Leicester team, and great young French prospect here. And we'll see if he can learn off Johnny Evans, who's such a great role model and veteran in this team, who's won Premier Leagues in this fantastic league of ours. But we got to look at Wolves, who still can't find a way to get Adama Traore into this lineup, which is very interesting of how great of a season he had last year when he's only coming on this year as a late sub. But I don't know, they got to find a place for him or else get him out, because he's a young talent and he wants some starting places in this team.
Yeah, definitely. It's one of those ones where if you're not going to play him, you think you would want to get some money back for him, because he definitely holds a lot of value to a team that wants to play him. And I guess at this point in time, they value Pedro Neto a little bit more than Adama Traore, or they don't want to play him in that advanced of a position for the whole game, whatever it is. But He's not getting in that right wing back spot anymore with Nelson Smittle being acquired over the summer, and I guess they're liking Pedro Neto right now, and maybe they prefer Troy as a sub, but it's a lot of money for a club the stature of Wolves to be holding on the bench when they could sell him and improve the squad somewhere else. So it'll be interesting to see if anyone makes a push for him in January, or if Wolves have any interest in selling him in January, although I haven't heard too many rumors on that one. But it is an interesting thing to see a player of his caliber sitting on the bench for a side like Wolves, when definitely Jimenez has potted in some goals, but they haven't exactly been banging them into the back of the net.
Yeah, for sure. You gotta question why this team is not playing a Traore with his pace getting behind. They could line him up besides Raul Jimenez, but I guess they don't want a pacey striker like Adama up top. But moving on to a pacey game, Brighton and Burnley. No, just kidding. We're not going to go there. No one wants to talk about Brighton and Burnley. We'll talk about some transfer rumors now. And Devin, what do you think is your most interesting transfer rumor at the moment right now?
Well, there's definitely some interesting ones, and it's an interesting dynamic given the short turnaround from the summer transfer window to the winter transfer window this year with the delay of COVID. But I think Liverpool's definitely going to be a team to watch. Someone that didn't make a mad splash this summer, although did get Thiago and Jota, so definitely did spend more than the summer before. But are definitely going to be in the need of some center backs, I would imagine, come the window. And they've been linked with a couple of players. Connell's linked there again, and I'd be surprised if we don't see a center back of some decent caliber go there in January.
Yeah, for sure. I completely agree with you. And you got David Alaba, whose contract's coming up, and he doesn't want to re-sign for Bayern, which is quite telling. And he wants to move on and make another push for a different league title. And you never know. He could go to Liverpool. He could go to teams like Arsenal, Manchester United, who all need those left-footed center backs and star elite center back to come in and push them forward to this title, which everyone wants. But I think a big transfer rumor, which our other podcast star Brock will talk about the next day, was Memphis Depay, who was going to go to Barcelona this summer with all the rumors about Ronald Koeman, and then took a wild turn this past week. It was talking about going to Roma and Juventus, which no one saw coming, and I think it's a bizarre turn of events. And if I was him, I'd steer clear of Juventus because no one knows what's going to happen with them this season. But it's interesting to see those rumors, and I'm sure he will expand in the next episode of what he thinks of those rumors because he's a huge Depay supporter. But it's a very interesting transfer rumor about Depay.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see what happens with Depay. There's been quite a few rumors with him over the last 12, 18 months, and like you say, it was rumored to go to Barca this summer, and with the appointment of Ronald Koeman, most would have expected that the Dutchman would have went there and might have been their new center forward, but it didn't work out that way, and it'll be interesting to see. We'll definitely expand with that on next episode, as our third member is essentially a Depay fan and cheers for the team that Depay is on, and doesn't essentially have any teams that he cheers for, but nonetheless, we'll delve into that in a bit more at that point. And it'll be interesting to see. He's been definitely linked with several clubs over the last 12, 18 months, and has performed well in Ligue 1, and it'll be interesting to see whenever he inevitably leaves how well he performs in another league.
Yeah, for sure. I think another big transfer we've got to talk about here is Cristiano Ronaldo going back to Manchester United, which everyone's been hot talking point about my club, Manchester United, and I think it's a very interesting rumor. Many people are very 50-50 on this, and I'd just like to see what you have to think about this big rumor.
It's an interesting one. It seems like in the last 3 or 4 months that Juve have wanted to unload some money. Obviously, everyone's losing some money with COVID, and as much as the small clubs are getting hit, the big clubs are getting hit too. It just doesn't necessarily impact the front line as much. But there's still millions in losses for everyone, and it'll be interesting to see how that goes. With obviously Ronaldo's a marquee player, and as much as he's aging, he's still very much a world-class player, and it'll be interesting to see. I wouldn't be surprised if we see him leave Juventus by the end of the season, but where he goes is hard to say at this point. Manchester United are definitely one of the few teams in world football that could afford him, but it'll be interesting to see at his age now where he goes and how much someone is willing to pay for him.
Well, on the topic of football, but not exactly football, is FIFA a huge organization, and EA is obviously a huge organization behind this massive game that we all hate and love. But we're two big fans of this game, and we always play this, and we have some huge topics on league SBCs and menu grinding this year's FIFA 21. And Devin's a big menu grinder in league SBCs, and I'd like to get your thoughts on the new menus this year.
Yeah, it's definitely interesting. I mean, obviously, since League SBCs have been implemented years ago, it started when they were one time. You got a sick card. We had six Luis Suarez's cards back in the day. Wasn't so much about the packs then. It was just about, oh my god, I get this sick card. And then we saw FIFA 19 where it was nuts. It was all repeatable. The profit you can make off of it was insane. The players weren't so fun, but nonetheless, the profit you can make off of it was absolutely nuts. And now the last 2 years, we've seen a slow decline. Where last year they just nerfed the packs and nerfed the rating of the players you got back, and removing icon SBCs along with it. And then now this year, we've gotten to a point where half of your packs are untradeable, so you're not getting any liquid coins back. All of your tradable packs are silvers for the most part. And I mean, for someone like myself, part of it was making profit and part of it was opening the packs. But fact of the matter is I love opening packs, but I'm not going to do the league SBCs to open packs when I'm just throwing coins down the drain every time. And it's really disappointing to see from EA. Now, we know that they love to make money, and everything in their game is about making sure they drive people to the FIFA points section. But it's disappointing to see from someone like myself who spent hours and hours doing like SBCs over the last couple of years for the fun of the grind of making coins and of being able to open a bunch of packs without spending a bunch of money on the game. But it's disappointing to see from EA. There's some positives to it, and if you really spent time on it and grinded it, you could make it efficient. But it is disappointing to see from EA. They've very much killed that side of the game. Everyone was excited that Icon SBCs were coming back this year, but it doesn't look like Icon SBCs are going to necessarily be that viable or easily to do from the League SBCs anyways. So it's disappointing from EA in my perspective. I see it from the business perspective, but from a consumer, it definitely kind of kills that part of the game for myself at least.
So as we talked about, EA has really screwed up on the league SBCs this year, and they've made it quite difficult to make a grindable profit. But for your Road to Glory people and your first owner teams, just like I have, and I enjoy playing with cards that are my own, you can look at the objective section with EA, who have really smashed out of the park this year, I'd have to say. But Devin, coming from your side of point of view, who's a grinder in the game, what would you have to say about their view on objectives this year and what they've given us?
Yeah, I think it's much improved this year. Coming in from last year where they brought in milestones and there was some good leaks from the beta in which we thought we were going to get a bunch of good objectives, and it just didn't turn out. We got 5 players in milestones, 1 from each major league, in which it took, I want to say, until end of January or start of February to get the 5th one, Moy Gomez from the La Liga. And then we had our upgrades later in the year where those upgrades were essentially irrelevant, and that was it. And outside of that, you had a few promo players that came in as objectives, but doing it in Rivals, I know there's some people that still like it in Rivals for the sake of getting Rivals points, but doing it at a highly low with Rivals was just not possible depending on the objectives, and then everyone was deranking, and it just wasn't a good fit. But this year I think there's been a good balance in having Rivals and friendlies where they have implemented skill-based matchmaking, but it's a much larger threshold, and I don't find myself having to play someone who's at an elite level all the time. And they've also made it a lot better in adding more objectives and how the objectives are done, and that you don't have to necessarily score goals in wins, but there is a win requirement that's just separate, so people don't just score 10 goals in a game and the other people score. But I think it's been a good balance. We've already seen from this current Road to the Final objective promo that we got right now, we've had a Kunde and a Correa. We saw during the Row Breakers that we've had an Akinfenwa. And we've also had that the Mukiele card as well. We've seen the introduction of Silver Beasts this year, which I think is a brilliant addition. Having random boosted silver cards every week through the Team of the Week, having those be an objective and have it be unlockable in a game mode where you can only use silvers back like in daily knockout tournaments and like FIFA 17 and FIFA 18. We've seen the MLS objectives already come in as well, and I hope they continue with more of those this week. I think they've done really well on that side of things so far this year. it's definitely not equal to menu grinding in the trading sense, but you definitely get way more out of playing the game this year than you could in previous FIFAs.
Yeah, for sure. And the gameplay seems to be more enjoyable. I think, for speaking from my part, I think it's been better than last year's gameplay. And as I'm a first owner kind of guy for my club, and all my players are untradeable or tradable first owner players, this new objective that they're really doing is amazing, and I've really enjoyed it. I may be first owner of a club, but I ain't as rich as the new owner of Wrexham, Ryan Reynolds, who's splashed 3 million on a new club in Canadian money. But Devin has 3 million on FIFA, so it doesn't really add up to the same. I'm a first owner, and he's a $3 million coin kind of guy with the grindable menus. But what can you do? But this is going to be all for our third episode of Football on Football. From me and Devin, we'd like to say make sure to like and subscribe for this episode in our channel. We'd like to get some more viewers up and everything, but share it with your friends and everybody. And we'll hopefully have our other member, Brock, on for next episode. And we'd like to say thank you for joining us. And any last remarks, Devin?
No, I think this is all good. Look forward to doing it again next week.
See you, everybody. See you next week.